Thank you, and sorry for the brief delay, but we'll move right on into the program since we've been through it one time now. My name is Phil Kirk, and I'm a part-time advisor on community relations for NCICU. And I would remind you that we are recording the session, and make sure that you've got your view on speaker view rather than gallery view. I want to thank the campus teams and the coordinators for your participation. We recognize our 10th anniversary is not like we wanted it to be, but like Dr. Williams said, we think we're the only state private college association that's doing the Zoom this year, or the program this year. I'd like to thank sponsors who may still be with us that make this possible. Now I'd like to ask each campus coordinator to identify himself or herself, and let each team member just introduce themselves by name. We'll start with Chowan University.
I'm Dr. Keith Reich, Chair of the Religion Department at Chowan, and I'll let my team members introduce themselves.
Hello, good morning. My name is Grace Arredondo, and I'm a senior English major at Chowan University.
My name is Ryan Martin. I'm a senior business major at Chowan University, and I'm also currently on a bus right now headed to North Greenville University for a soccer game tomorrow.
Hello, my name is Dawson Cox at Chowan University. I'm a graphic design major and I'm a freshman.
Good luck in your soccer game. Glad you're getting to play.
Hi, my name is Alec Jackson. I'm a sophomore, and my major is biology.
Hello, I'm Jackson Brooks. I'm a junior history major at Chowan University.
Anybody else from Chowan? Okay, we'll move to High Point University.
Good morning, I'm Amy MacArthur. I'm campus co-coordinator at High Point University, and I'll let my students introduce themselves. And good to see some of you, familiar faces here. Great to see you, even if it's in this format. But we'll start with Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a senior and a philosophy major.
Hi, I'm Josiah. I'm a junior and a neuroscience and philosophy major.
Hello, I'm Will. My camera's not working, so you can't see me. I'm a sophomore and a history major.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm a senior getting a dual degree, triple major in economics, mathematics, philosophy with a minor in statistics.
Hi, I'm Ella. I'm a junior and my psychology major with double minoring in marketing and sales.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm a computer science and philosophy double major, and this is my senior year.
I'm Thaddeus, the other co-coordinator, and that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. And I would remind Meredith College is next, and for the sake of time, please, if the students will just give their name. Thank you. The coordinator.
Hi, I'm Stephen Benko. I'm one of the coordinators for Meredith College.
Hi, I'm Lisa DeLeese, also a coordinator for Meredith.
I'm Cheryl Jenkins, also a coordinator for Meredith College.
Hi, I'm Elena Blackwelder, and I'm a team member for Meredith College.
Hi, I'm Scout Birch, and I'm a team member for Meredith College.
Hi, I'm Safa Ahmed, and I'm also a team member from Meredith College.
Hello, I'm Linda Yeager, and I'm the final team member of Meredith College.
And now North Carolina Wesleyan College.
I'm Jared Kelly, and I'm one of the co-coordinators for North Carolina Wesleyan.
My name is Trey Robertson. I am a team member.
Hi, I'm Cassidy Searcy, and I'm a team member as well.
Hi, I'm Catherine Leak. I am a team member.
Hi, my name is Honesty Barrett, and I am a team member.
Hello, I'm Abigail Shaw, and I'm also a team member.
Hi, Jason Buell, and that concludes our introductions.
Thank you. So again, welcome and thank you, and we'll get started. As you know, this session is on public schools, K through 12, and I would remind you that the cases were written during the summer. So some data may seem a little bit outdated. Just a reminder, you have 7 minutes to present your case. When there's 1 minute left, I will hold up the sign that says 1 minute. We're very transparent. I've got the name of the 4 schools written on a piece of paper, and they're in this bowl, and I will draw them out without looking. Chowan University will go first. So let me be sure my timer's working. Chowan University will now begin.
Thank you so much for this opportunity for us to discuss this important topic today. It is the position of Chowan University that it is most virtuous for the school boards of public school systems to determine via a needs-based system which students require what type of learning environment. They should then provide an equal education to students across the in-person, hybrid, and virtual learning platforms. We believe this because we follow Aristotle's ethical system, commonly known as virtue ethics. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher, a student of Plato, and later a teacher to Alexander the Great. And virtue ethics states that we practice and cultivate virtuous characteristics into our everyday lives in order to create a more virtuous society. So we will not do something that is obviously wrong in order to create a supposed greater good, nor do we blindly follow a set of rules. Rather, it is through our golden mean, and today the virtues of justice, compassion, and citizenship that we have provided the most ethical and virtuous outcome. I would like to pass the conversation to my colleague Ryan, who will further discuss our golden mean. Ryan. Ryan, can you hear us?
Ryan, if you're muted, be sure you unmute.
Okay, so he must be having technical difficulties with the bus, so I'm going to go ahead and establish what our golden means for this case are. Basically, the golden mean is finding the midpoint between two extremes. So on one hand, we have that the school boards have completely shut down the schools and basically made it to where it's all virtual learning. And that, inherently deprives children of the very basic psychological and social development that they require. And on the other hand, we have that school boards have it being all in person, but they're not really enforcing COVID restrictions as they should be. So we found in the middle for our golden mean that our position meets that middle ground requirement, and that they should, on a needs basis, and determine what schools or what students require what type of learning environments, and then present each of those environments equally to all students. So I'd like to pass the conversation now to Dawson, who will discuss our first virtue.
Thank you, Grace. Our first virtue is justice. Justice is defined as treating all parties involved equally and fairly. We believe that it is just to allow school boards to determine which students are fully online, in a hybrid, or completely in the classroom. Mandating that all students must be online, or that all students must be in the classroom, is not just towards either party. That being said, online classes and in-person classes must be taught equally, with the same quality of education and teachers and the same resources as the other. The quality of the education in the classroom can't be higher than the quality of education online. This provides a fair and equal learning environment for all students while keeping students and employees safe and healthy during the pandemic. With that being said, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague Alec, who will discuss our second virtue.
Thank you, Dawson. Compassion can be defined as the sympathetic concern for the misfortunes of others. A quote about compassion says, "Our human compassion binds us the one to the other, not in pity or patronizingly, but as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope for the future." Nelson Mandela. Compassion applies to the K-12 education case on COVID in many ways. It is important to state that people's education and health are at risk, and that determining to open up the schools for K-12 or in a hybridized setting or not opening up schools will impact the parties that include students, parents, and school workers. It is the virtuous thing to do by establishing a way to benefit the parties involved. And with that, I'd like to pass it to Jackson, who will discuss the virtue citizenship.
Thank you. The virtue of citizenship is defined as acting with the understanding that we are part of a community and that all of our fates are intertwined. Theodore Roosevelt once said the following about citizenship: character is far more important than intellect in making a man a good citizen or successful at his calling. Meaning, by character, not only such qualities as honesty and truthfulness, but courage, perseverance, and self-reliance. It is the virtuous thing to do for local school boards to provide opportunities for virtual, in-person, and hybrid learning opportunities for students. In order to practice good citizenship, school boards must cater their situation to allow every child equal opportunities that suit their educational needs. However, good citizenship does not imply children should have a one-suits-all education, but instead cater to the individual children for the betterment of the community. On the same note, however, whatever measures school boards decide to employ should always act in the best interest of the child and his or her safety, as that should remain the priority. Individuals must practice virtuous citizenship, as the understanding that our actions affect those around us is essential to the conception of a safe educational structure during COVID-19. With that being said, I would like to pass the conversation back to my colleague, Grace.
Thank you so much, Jackson. I'd like to take this opportunity to review our position. We believe that through Aristotle's virtue ethics, our established golden mean, and the defined virtues of justice, compassion, and citizenship, that we have arrived at the most ethical position. It is most virtuous for the public school systems to utilize, based on a needs-based system, to place students in either hybrid, in-person, or virtual learning environments, and then provide an equal education to every student. In order for school boards to act ethically, it is imperative that they enforce CDC COVID-19 guidelines and restrictions, including mask wearing and social distancing. Many public schools already enforce some type of dress code or insist students wear a uniform. Enforcing mask wearing should be no different. If females can be sent to the principal's office for showing their shoulders, then the same should happen to students who cannot obey mandatory mask rules. Additionally, public schools need to utilize their resources and be creative about how to stay actively involved in the lives of their virtual learners. For example, in Texas, school buses in many districts continue to travel the regular routes, delivering meals and homework to their stops. This is especially vital to students who rely on meal programs or live in rural areas where many families are unable to make the trips to destined pickup sites. And at Lincoln Middle School in West Virginia, Wi-Fi signals cover the school's parking lots, allowing families to drive up and download the materials without having to leave their cars. These examples of attentive, genuine care for the needs of others is the epitome of virtuous and—
I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you so much.
We're sorry too, but we have to. Okay, we'll draw for the next presenters. High Point University will go next. High Point, you may begin.
Hi, thank you, and good morning. So today we're going to be talking about the ethical ramifications of opening schools and what the responsibility is for each school to provide for the community. And something really important about schools is that they're not only providing education and social development for children, but they're also providing a necessary aspect to the community, such as food and like meals for low-income students, and also daycare for parents who can't watch their children all day. So we have a responsibility as the schools and as ethical coordinators to kind of make sure that every child has what they need and is getting what they deserve. Because not every child is in an equal situation, so not every child should be treated equally. We need to use a Rawlsian approach to identify the differences in each person's situation in order to provide for them differently and make sure that they have the ability to succeed whenever, no matter what they find themselves in. And I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, who is going to talk about Rawls and sort of different principles.
The crux of Rawls's arguments for ethics are that you really ought to be focused on those who are the least well off. If you're only doing if you're only making changes that advantage the people who are the best off, well, that's not particularly fair. And a mechanism he uses for this is the veil of ignorance. The idea that suppose you were to be randomly assigned to any sort of role in society. In this situation, suppose you happen to be the kid from a poor family. Suppose that you happen to be the parent of a kid who you absolutely need that daycare for. That's why we need to really put an emphasis here, not just on getting as many students in the classroom, but also considering, how do we find those who need the help the most? The responsibility that we have to schools arises from how much good it provides to the community. It is the best mechanism we have for social mobility. As was already mentioned, it's great for food. It is, if there is a set of things that we can have open, schools should be at the top of that list because it is so beneficial to people least well off. And I'll hand that off to my teammate.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to be talking about how the public education system has an ethical responsibility to provide, uphold, and offer help in multiple areas to children. As the pandemic threatens to change traditional classroom learning ways to a new wave of virtual learning, there are numerous ways in which this change will negatively affect and cause futuristic problems for children and their development. This is why we propose that a hybrid approach be accepted as the primary way to teach during a pandemic, and as well as a virtual approach on the other days that a hybrid approach is not in place. So first, I would like to talk about how the interruption of education and the loss of social development on children's development is a primary and fundamental issue. Children must gain proper social and emotional knowledge that will help them succeed throughout their lifetime. Our brains experience the greatest development and growth between ages of between birth and 8 years old. The role of teachers and their use of the creative approach in the classroom learning systems is paramount, and that's how students learn best. It's also the first time separation from their parents. It's also group participation, cooperation, problem solving through compromise, and sharing important traits that children so crucially need to learn at such a young age. This type of learning takes place in the classroom. Socialization involves acquiring these values, the knowledge and skills enabling children to relate to others effectively and to contribute in positive ways to family, the school, and the community. And for example, Illinois School Board and as well as Massachusetts School Board have both recognized that it's extremely important to focus on not only the physical health, safety, and nutrition, but also on the social, emotional, and mental health needs, which is intensified during this time especially. Next, I want to get into the health and safety of children, especially the immunocompromised children, when returning back to school in the hybrid approach. While children do appear less likely to have severe symptoms and severe illnesses from COVID-19, there is studies suggesting that they still are likely to spread the infection, and schools need to plan for this. For children who are immunocompromised, school boards should support accommodations and otherwise medically vulnerable students and students with special transportation needs however possible. All children should receive the same level of education no matter what, but if they have special accommodations, they must also be treated differently as well, as we said with Rawls' difference approach. As Rawls argues with the difference principle, inequalities in the distribution of these goods are permissible only if they benefit the least well-off positions of society. Children who are at a higher risk of developing life-threatening systems like COVID-19 are considered least off and therefore deserve more accommodations. Next, I would like to talk about the students with learning disabilities or behavioral issues that cannot be addressed at home. Low-income and academically struggling children are more likely to experience absence of schooling and may not get as much rich academic learning experiences from home. And parents are not teachers and cannot offer them as much support as they can in the classroom from professionals. And finally, I would like to talk about the psychology of this and how crucial it is that from ages 5 to 13, socialization is the most important time for developmental cognitive development and social growth. These crucial skills are learned from social experiences that can only really be happening from the classroom in order to fully develop their intellectual and cognitive approach. And I will now pass the remainder of my time to my colleague, Josiah.
So what we propose is a hybrid approach, giving low income and students who need the most help because they need it the most, honestly. We are not proposing an equal solution because people don't have an equal reality. A lot of people need more help than others, and what we are proposing is an equitable solution based on.
But your time is up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll pick the third team. North Carolina Wesleyan. Excuse me 1 second, my timer. Here it is, okay. North Carolina Wesleyan may now begin.
Good afternoon. We are the North Carolina Wesleyan College ethics team. I'd like to thank the NCICU and volunteers for putting on the Ethics Bowl this year, especially considering the circumstances. My name is Trey Robertson, and I'm joined by my teammates Honesty, Chastity, Catherine, and Abigail. Our position on the nature of public schools during the pandemic is based on the fact that online schooling tends to be the norm, but we believe that schools should offer a hybridized approach to this schooling. We seek to justify our position using the ethics of care in conjunction with the golden mean. My teammate, ethical guru Honesty, will speak more about the framework, and my teammates Chastity, Catherine, and Abigail will provide supporting evidence. Finally, I will conclude by summarizing our position on the matter. I'd like to now hand it off to Honesty.
Thank you, Trey. As stated by our team captain, Trey, we believe that the public school system has an ethical responsibility to assist teachers and students during this pandemic. We have arrived at our position using the golden mean. The golden mean emphasizes balance between two extremes. The two extremes in this case are in-person learning versus virtual learning at home. My team members will argue and provide evidence that furthers the notion of the golden mean. Just from a hybridized learning approach, just to support both teachers and students, by implementing virtual learning and in-person learning to strengthen the learning experience for students and provide support for teachers, fits the ethical framework of the golden mean. And I will now hand it off to Catherine to start our evidence for our team's position.
Thank you, Honesty. Earlier this month, Governor Roy Cooper and Dr. Mandy Tolson both had stated that children should be back in the classroom safely. According to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, children make up very few COVID-19 cases throughout the entire state. About 11% of early this month's cases were among people under 18. And as of recently, Senate Bill 37 was presented to the North Carolina General Assembly, where this bill states that public schools must follow under Plan A, which is basically a minimum amount of students in the classrooms while practicing social distancing, hand washing, and enforcing mask rules, along with rotating schedules and frequent disinfecting sessions. They also believe that children are less likely to spread the disease than adults. Younger children and adolescents have a better chance of getting back to some sense of normalcy. And for that, I will pass this on to Chastity on her stance on public school.
Thank you, Catherine. So some low-income families and working parents might depend on schools for childcare during the day. Not only that, but some parents can't afford the cost of daycare or after-school programs. So they really depend on daytime supervision that's provided by the schools. That's according to the New York Times. And now according to an article from Georgetown EDU, 17% of students don't have access to broadband internet at home. And this is about 3 million students in total. So that's a good chunk of students. And that same article mentioned that staying at home all day can increase depression, anxiety, and loneliness in students, which can ultimately negatively affect schoolwork and the quality of education for students who are doing remote or virtual learning. And along the lines of staying at home, there are increased amounts of screen time. And so screen times and the increase of screen time just in general is raising concerns for experts, and children spend on average 4 to 6 hours using screens daily, and teens spend up to 9 hours using screen time. And too much screen time can cause students to experience thinning of their brain's cortex, and this is an area that's related to critical thinking and reasoning. And also youth can suffer from impaired sleep and delays in learning skills with excessive screen time. And so we feel that even though this may be an era of social media, hybrid school, and in-person school, like implementing hybrid school will decrease the amount of screen time, excessive screen time for youth. And so I will now pass this on to Trey.
It'll go to me. Actually, another reason we want to get kids back to school is school provides meals to children who may not have enough food at home due to financial problems. 61% of Hispanic families, 52% of Native American families, and 43% of Black families have trouble with feeding their families. Schools can provide those meals for students who may not have access to food at home or those 3 meals a day. Schools can provide that lunch, and some schools provide a breakfast and a lunch. And without going to school, some of these kids will not be getting those 3 meals a day. And I will give it back to Trey.
Thank you, Abigail. So in restating our position as conclusion, we find that a hybridized approach to learning would allow families lesser advantage to access resources necessary for education and possibly nourishment, such as meals, while also socializing children, cutting down on possible negative side effects of this pandemic. This applies to, of course, the golden mean, as mentioned by Honesty, in that we are seeking to find a middle ground between exclusively online learning and exclusively in-person learning to take into account the safeties and concerns of this pandemic. And with that, I'd like to thank the NCICU and volunteers one more time before yielding the remainder of our time.
Thank you. Okay, not much wondering about the next team. We'll call on Meredith College. Meredith College, you may begin.
Thank you to the facilitators who are here with us today, and thank you to our fellow colleges and universities for being here today as well. We've really been enjoying this conversation. So to the question of what is the ethical responsibility of local school boards to provide public education during a prolonged state of emergency such as a pandemic, Meredith College asserts that the responsibility is to provide emotional and mental support over the typical educational benchmarks. In this unprecedented time, we have to ensure that students receive adequate attention and care while also prioritizing the protection of students and teachers. We came to this conclusion by following a utilitarian approach. Utilitarianism is an approach to moral and ethical decision-making that has an emphasis on optimizing outcomes instead of motives and ultimately promotes the betterment of society. Under this theory, every human is an equal moral being. It focuses on the greatest happiness principle, which states that actions are right as they tend to promote happiness and wrong as they tend to promote the opposite. This is essentially the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Good in utilitarianism can be defined as pleasure, happiness, or utility. Pleasure is the absence of pain or the increase of good feeling. And pleasure in this case could be avoiding the COVID-19 virus and the contraction of the virus itself. Happiness is the full flourishing of the human being, the expansion of intellect, and the ability to act as a rational human, all of which can be provided by education and the services provided in public schools. It enhances the quality of one's experiences, and it must be valued. The third good in utilitarianism is public utility, which is public usefulness, and it makes society more efficient. In this situation, though, we want to specifically focus on good as happiness. We propose the following steps for providing education in this prolonged state of emergency. First, vaccinating teachers, staff, and administrators who must be in the building, and keeping in-person staff as minimal as possible. Second, prioritizing younger children and students with special needs who need the attention in in-person class more than older students, such as high schoolers, who can focus better online.
And then third, expanding after school programs to be accommodating for parents who have jobs. Now I'm gonna pass it on to my teammate who can further elaborate on our solution to this question.
Thank you, Elena. So as Elena said, our first point is that we believe that we should vaccinate teachers, staff, and administrators first, and keep in-person staff as minimal as possible. We need to think of the safety of the students and of the staff and faculty members, and prioritize that safety. Many students from low-income families and rural households may not have access to computers or have parents or guardians at home who can watch over them and help them. And we understand that. And we understand that, there's been a lot of mothers that have had to quit their jobs because they haven't been able to find childcare for their kids. And at the same time, we understand that other parents don't want to send their kids to school because of COVID and all the dangers of getting sick and things like that. However, because of all these issues, we believe that sending students to a school where the staff and the teachers and the faculty are vaccinated will provide the most social utility and pleasure, as people will be safer, which falls under utilitarianism. And then my teammate Linda will talk more about the second point.
Thank you, Safa. So our second point is how we want to prioritize younger children and students with needs who need the attention of in-person classes more than older students like high schoolers. Personally, I have a 5-year-old brother who started kindergarten during a pandemic, and not only is he learning his basic education, he's also learning how to learn. And doing that on a computer is very difficult for someone as young as 5 years old. I also have 2 sisters who are in high school, and they're better able to understand the sacrifice that they need to make to have an online education versus my younger brother, who does not necessarily understand the impact of a global pandemic on his education. And we want to prioritize these younger children and students with special needs because we want to focus on the greatest happiness principle, which states that actions are right as they tend to promote the most happiness and wrong as they tend to promote the opposite. The action that forces young children and students with special needs to learn online does not promote happiness, which is why it is important to vaccinate teachers and necessary staff so we can facilitate the safe transition to in-person classes for these students. And I will pass it on to my teammate who will continue.
Thank you, Linda. So our third and final point and solution to this issue is expanding after-school programs to be accommodating for parents. We recognize that the pandemic has shifted both employment opportunities as well as mental health needs. So by expanding after-school programs, we're making the school schedule more flexible for parents who may have needed to acquire a second job or whose jobs have hours that don't allow them to pick up their student from school or provide childcare after school. This also provides for students a space for them to socialize, which is a privilege that they have been denied this past year during the pandemic. We've seen in recent studies that student suicide rates are increasing during the pandemic, and after-school programs would give schools more time to provide resources such as counseling for these students, as well as stability in the way of meals and socialization. So to review our answer, we are saying that we need to, 1, vaccinate teachers, administrators, and all necessary staff first, so that parents and students can feel confident about the safety of the school environment, as well as keeping staff at a minimum. 2, we need to prioritize younger children and students with special needs, because those are the ones that suffer the most from online learning and fall behind faster than older students. And 3, we need to expand after-school programs to be accommodating for parents. All 3 of these promote the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and therefore it's the moral solution to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all 4 teams. And now we do have almost 15 minutes that we'll open the floor for my timer going off. We'll open the floor to team members to comment, any of our sponsors who are still here, our coordinators. You may ask questions of each other. You may ask for clarification of some point. You can even disagree. We won't get into a debate, but you can even disagree. You also may want to comment on the way the presentations went. In other words, I thought they were extremely, showed a lot of careful thought, and you came up with solutions. A lot of times people spend too much time on the problem and don't offer solutions. Y'all offered specific solutions, so I would commend you for that. But so at this time, I'll open the floor to anybody who wants to make any comments or ask questions of each other.
I have a question.
Okay.
So two of the different teams brought up the golden mean. And it seems like nice to use in situation when we're talking about, do we have it online? Do we have it in person? And it sort of directs you towards the hybrid model. But suppose this were to have happened in a different year, a different situation, and instead we were to be talking about, well, should we have students go to school 3 days a week or 5 days a week? The golden mean in that instance would probably direct us towards just 4 days a week. Although our understanding of the epidemiology now would kind of point to something different. So how does the golden mean sort of direct us to something other than just the Overton window?
Well, thank you for that input in your hypothetical situation. I'm not the expert on the golden mean, unfortunately. Our colleague was unable to discuss it, but I can clarify that we utilize it as a tool to help us find the midpoint between two extremes of any given situation. So just for this case, we decided that one extreme was for schools to completely be virtual and students have to be online, which is unfair to many students who don't have Wi-Fi and whose parents work. It creates several disadvantages, even for children who rely on meal programs just to make it through the day. And on the other hand, we have schools completely ignoring the limitations that have been given to maximum capacity of people in buildings and just going completely in person. So our approach was a needs-based system where the public school systems decide what students, based on that needs-based system, would do best in all online, hybrid, or all in-person formats. So that's just how we applied it to this case. But we use that as a tool that we apply to almost all of our cases. So thank you for your question.
Other comments and or questions? While you're trying to think of one, I'll mention something that's sort of related, but not an issue that's been any focus. I've talked to a lot of K-12 school superintendents over the years, and they tell me, in all seriousness, one of their biggest challenges is when it snows or when there's ice, whether to open school or close school early or whatever. But the fact now that we can do virtual teaching and virtual opening, that schools should not, some people feel that schools will not have to have any more snow days, which will definitely disappoint some students. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but it certainly would be more possible now than it would have 5 years ago. Another positive is that all of this debate about online is causing the legislature and the Congress to appropriate more money for broadband expansion. It's really highlighted the needs in the rural areas. So sometimes out of a crisis can come something good, like the expansion of broadband. All right, you didn't come to hear me talk, but if y'all don't talk, then I talk. So let's hear from some of y'all.
I feel a little bit of schadenfreude towards the kids who now don't get snow days, because like I'm from Illinois and it would get to, like -40, we'd still have class. And I know all of you in North Carolina, like, oh, if it gets below 20, like, oh, it's terrifying. So yeah, I'm just like, well, now you have to know what I went through.
Well, and just to clarify, what I said may not happen, but it certainly can happen now. Still have.
Actually, I do want to say that my sister is in high school and it did snow like 2 inches maybe like 2 weeks ago, and they did still get a snow day.
Yeah. Habits and traditions are hard to change, even if you can.
Definitely for me, if we didn't have any snow days, it would put a damper on my overall happiness. But I have a question. So I know from all the presentations, we mentioned how schools are really an amalgamation of providing multiple different benefits and resources to children, from food, childcare, an environment that facilitates cognitive development. And one of the things that I didn't really hear too often is that, in addition to making sure it's safe for students to come back, we also have to ensure that the staff are adequately prepared and it's safe for the teachers and the other adults that are also involved in making sure that schools can function accordingly. And because of the different possible implications of contracting COVID, but there were some studies done by the CDC that showed that the primary cause of COVID infection for teachers and other staff members is staff-to-staff interactions. So I guess my question is for all teams, and also specifically for Meredith College, because y'all talked about a response for staff members and teachers coming back and teaching in person. But how does the approach to making sure that it's ethical and describing the responsibility the school board has to teachers, how does that change if the school doesn't have the adequate resources to be able to vaccinate all the teachers?
Yeah,
I think they did say that they wanted to prioritize vaccines for the teachers.
yes. So our first point was that there should be a prioritization for teachers, administration and staff going into schools. But the question of access is an important one. And we believe that governing bodies should not ask teachers to step back into the classroom without also providing a way for them to become vaccinated first. Because we realize that teachers are humans too, and they have family. They themselves may be immunocompromised, or they may live with somebody that's immunocompromised. So we do think that it's very important to prioritize the health and safety of teachers, as we stated in our argument.
And I believe teachers are in the next group, or maybe in the current group, I'm not sure. But not that anybody cares about my position, but I've had a simplistic one from the very beginning, that teachers should not have to teach if they weren't vaccinated, if they had not access to the vaccine.
Yes, teachers are in this current group,
right,
that are going now.
Is that just a state of North Carolina thing?
It's up to each state.
Okay.
Each state can determine its priorities. Okay, we have about 6 or 7 more minutes. If you have any other on the mic.
I've got a question for Chowan. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce the school? Chowan?
Chowan.
Right?
Chowan University, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so like something that you let off was saying that like it's really, really important to get students back into the classroom, because there are a lot of like fundamental things you don't get from things online, like all the socialization and stuff like that. And you really, really focus on like, we need to make sure that like the students that we decide to have all online or all in person or some mix of that it's all equal in the end. And I'm just addressing you here because you made that point so clearly, but I think every single group here that brings up the hybrid model has to like consider this. How do we actually feel like that could be equal if we preface it by saying it's so important to get people in the classroom? If we say that there are fundamental things that you only get in person, like how do we feel about making sure that still is like sufficiently fair?
No, definitely. And that is the question. It is the problem that's been posed to school boards across the nation, is making sure they provide that equal education. But the fact that pretty much every team stated is that every family's situation is different. Some people thrive in that in-person environment, and students, it's psychologically proven that for their development that they need to be in the classroom. But unfortunately, during this time, that's not possible to have every day in person. And as we've also stated, and many other teams stated, that lots of families, particularly rural or impoverished families, can't afford to have a parent home with their children to make sure that they're studying and in the classroom and going to school. And they also can't afford to miss out on the meal programs that are provided to them through the schools. So that's what we meant by a needs-based system, meaning that the school will evaluate each student for their families and what would work best for them, and ultimately devise a system to where they would attend school through their category, and they would all receive an equal appreciation and education by their teachers, meaning that the teachers wouldn't spend more time or dedication on the in-person students and leave out the virtual ones. It's all as inclusive as it possibly can be. And we didn't really specify on how they should go about that, because that's up to their creativity. And we discussed it's up to school boards to get creative, as the examples I listed in Texas and West Virginia, I believe. So thank you. I'm glad I got to clarify that.
So I have a question for all of the colleges, because we talked a lot about waiting for teachers to get vaccinated before we have a completely safe environment. So how would you respond to the counter argument that we currently have grocery stores that are completely functional, and we're not waiting on them? We're not waiting on the employees to be vaccinated prior to opening them up. And secondly, COVID transmission is primarily is most contagious from adult to adult contact. So there's a lot of research that between children and adults is not the primary way that adults are infected. So how would you approach that?
I know for one, the argument regarding teachers being infected by students, there's actually a large concern about teachers being the ones to infect students. A lot of the research coming out now has, and recently as more schools open up in person, is that teachers are bringing COVID to their students, and the students are able to still pass it around, still contract it. And so it's still posing a large health issue, which is why teachers need to be vaccinated. For the grocery stores and other essential workers, I know Meredith College would believe that they should absolutely be vaccinated first too. We should have been prioritizing people over economy during this pandemic the whole time. And so to say now that just because these people didn't get vaccines first, that teachers shouldn't, it feels like it's creating a false binary, and it wouldn't necessarily make it would be better to make the vaccine widely available for everybody and for essential workers who are being put on the front lines before we fully open up the economy.
Yeah, I think we should be careful about priority groups because of the logistical crunch for getting vials ready. That's why we have vials that hold like 10 doses, and because they have to be like cryogenically stored. Like if you don't use the whole vial, you just got to throw out the rest. So like we saw in New York, especially, like when you have these very acute and specific priority groups, and you'll take away someone's medical license if they violate that line in any way, you're going to throw out a ton of your doses. And I think we're all really scarred from like early on in the pandemic, where like if you wanted to get a COVID test, like you had to be an NBA All-Star or like a millionaire. Whereas I think there is a lot more focus on the equity and the distribution of the vaccine than at that point. I think we really should be focused on like efficiency of distribution. Like teachers are absolutely important, and I think since we have like teacher unions, it's actually really easy to get them all together for priority groups. But we got to be careful about like making so many priority groups that it gets in the way of getting the vaccine out there to people.
I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up. Meredith College is participating in the National Ethics Bowl competition next weekend, and we actually have a case that asks us about prioritizing people and what do you do with extra vaccines. And so we kind of decided that, the groups help establish priority and they're important, but there should be a call list with different options. So it's not first come, first serve, and there's a established line of receiving the vaccine.